Welcome in. Last to do, Comey trial. Oh, that's a Freudian slip. Comey hearing. No trial yet.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Sometimes we say, hey, that's a bust. Let's start again. We don't bust many shows here. You know what that means? That's TV behind the scenes vernacular. I won't even waste your time with it. Welcome in on this Thursday evening. State Senator Susan Sosnowki is here to talk about some key issues that she'd like you to be paying attention to, and of course the legislature as well, including some gender equity when it comes to health insurance issues. Obviously there's so much going on that conversation. Not. You know, Washington was all revved up with someplace to go, and this whole investigative atmosphere, I think, has slowed down the president. He admits there's a cloud, right? So we still have to be prepared for some of the conversations there. And then there's issues of farm and food and a whole bunch of things. So stick around. Hope you will do that for the rest of the show. In the meantime, let's take a look at some of the things that are happening. And obviously, half the world was, maybe more, was watching the James Comey testimony today, and it was as fascinating as one would think or hope it would be, depending as to, I guess, whether you're titillated by this whole thing. I think the biggest key in this entire event today is, if you put it all together, Jim Comey's confirming that he's the one really that manipulated a special counsel to be hired. Because when Donald Trump made the assertion that he was, fired for other reasons, Comey took a look at that Russian interview, with Lester Holt and said, you know what, I got some proof about this. I've been canned, the conversation's not accurate, and I want a reporter to be able to put this out there. And once that story got published, that's when the Justice Department said, all right, we need a special counsel on this whole thing. So, you know what, you screw around with a pretty savvy guy like Jim Comey, he's going to figure out a way to, and the right way, to get the truth out. Here's the latest from the network as we were in early afternoon prior to their private session.
We swear to tell the truth.
Fired FBI Director James Comey took an oath before the Senate Intelligence Committee, then testified he was confused about why he lost his job.
The administration then chose to defame me and, more importantly, the FBI by saying that the organization was in disarray, that it was poorly led, that the workforce had lost confidence in its leader. Those were lies, plain and simple.
Comey told lawmakers he documented all of his conversations with Mr. Trump, which had not been his practice with Presidents Bush or Obama.
I was honestly concerned that he might lie about the nature of our meeting.
Comey said he had 3 in-person meetings with Mr. Trump. At one, he said the president asked for loyalty. At another, he requested Comey let the investigation into National Security Advisor Mike Flynn go.
I don't think it's for me to say whether the conversation I had with the president was an effort to obstruct. I took it as a very disturbing thing, very concerning.
Several Republicans say they do not see evidence of wrongdoing on the part of the president, but Democrats say there's a cloud of suspicion over the president's conduct.
Director Comey's firing and his testimony raise separate and troubling questions that we must get to the bottom of.
The president is watching the hearing with his personal lawyer, who released a statement last night saying Mr. Trump already feels completely and totally vindicated. Comey confirmed to lawmakers he told President Trump 3 times he was not personally being investigated.
And reportedly there were some cigars being fired up today that the Trump administration felt like they had kind of breathed through this thing, or breezed through it without any kind of issue. I don't know why they would be doing that. Clearly, the president is under investigation for obstruction of justice by the special counsel. All you have to do is follow the bouncing ball here. And one of the big discrepancies has now been made very clear for everybody. You know, that interview with Lester Holt where the president said, oh, well, Jim Comey, he called for a meeting to talk about his job.
In his interview with Lester Holt on NBC, the president said, I had dinner with him. He wanted to have dinner because he wanted to stay on. Is this an accurate statement?
No, sir.
Did you in any way initiate that dinner?
No. He called me at my desk at lunchtime and asked me, was I free for dinner that night? And called himself and said, can you come over for dinner tonight? And I said, yes, sir. He said, will 6 work? I think he said 6 first. And then he said, I was going to invite your whole family, but we'll do that next time. I wanted you to come over. And is that a good time? I said, sir, whatever works for you. And then he said, how about 6:30? And I said, whatever works for you, sir. And then I hung up and had to call my wife and break a date with her. I was supposed to take her out to dinner that night.
That's one of the all-time great excuses for breaking a date.
Yeah. In retrospect, I love spending time with my wife. I wish I'd been there that night.
Yeah, I will tell you that this hearing provided as much forward interest in this conversation as it possibly could have, as far as some of the intel and the classified stuff. We'll see how much of that leaks. It's not supposed to. Stay tuned. All right, this is confusing to me. Headline here, so the mayor says. Now, by the time you've heard this or you're watching this, I most likely have talked to Mayor Grebian in Pawtucket on the radio, weekdays 3 to 6 on WPRO, to try to clarify this, but at press time, I'm trying to figure out why the Pawtucket mayor feels like there's kind of a second wind for their effort in this General Assembly session. Watch.
Still pushing for the Paw Sox. Pawtucket Mayor Donald Grebian unveiled a draft Paw Sox bill 2 weeks ago, and now he hopes a reworked version will emerge in the Senate this week.
I'd love to have it addressed, vetted out, and then stay an extra week if they had to, but at least have that legislation, and I'm hopeful it'll get introduced this week.
The $83 million proposal outlined in the draft legislation received a cool reception from Governor Gina Raimondo.
And that's not something that I could support in good conscience.
And without her stamp of approval, House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello has said he won't act on the bill. But Grebian believes the new proposal addresses the governor's concerns.
My understanding, talking to the governor, that she will be very supportive of this project.
The governor's office tells us she has not seen anything new from Pawtucket and her position has not changed. Grebian hopes even if the bill isn't acted on right now, it will send a message to the team.
If there's not a bill on there to say, hey, maybe we'll do something in September, if there's nothing there, I truly believe that we are losing the Paw Sox.
Okay, so I believe that part is true, but there's a logjam right now, and there's a budget to be passed, and it's clear that the Speaker of the House and the Senate President don't want to take this up, and I've seen no evidence from the Senate that there's anything formally percolating. So I'm trying to figure out what Don Grebian is trying to do to wedge his way in here. He'd be better off just standing on his head, yelling please, than asserting that there is, another instrument being looked at here, because his credibility is ultimately important because he's the only one left standing making an argument for this thing, at least in the short term. But I absolutely believe that if there's not some kind of memorandum of agreement that says, look, we're going to try to put something together in the fall, just, hang on, I think the Paw Sox will have a deal to go, and sooner than Labor Day. All right, and that would be a shame, by the way. This is something. Look at the money here. Headlines. That's the new cost to up and operate the truck tolls. It was supposed to be in the $40 million range. The numbers have been all over Kingdom Come. Peter Alviti, the DOT director, was ridiculing the Republicans and Representative Morgan a little while back over her net evaluation of the impact of the tolls.
The red marks on this are all the errors. Probably be a failing grade. Well, she counted things into the cost of levying the tolls that have no involvement with tolls.
And that's with the old numbers. Now there's some new numbers in terms of the total cost and impact of the tolls. I got to tell you, I waged a bet with everybody last week that there won't be tolls. Well, they just signed the contract with the people. I hope there's some kind of out in that contract. We're going to investigate that because the game of chicken is on. The truckers are not going to sue until the entire structure is up. And should the state lose in terms of the discrimination for truckers only, the big decision is going to be whether to take the hit, take them down, which is what the Speaker and the Governor said would happen, or pass the cost along to everybody rolling on four wheels, or two. $70 million game of chicken. Safer bets to put up Paw Sox Stadium, seems to me. Kidding, sort of. All right, let's talk about what the senator is here for. Look at this headline, that's one, and then there's a press release there, a couple of different issues that I think we're getting into here. We may have flipped some things. There you go. the legislation is always hard to read, even with the glasses on. But Senator Susan Sosnowki has joined us. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
By the way, you're an American. Yes. Any take on the Comey hearing?
Well, it's certainly the Senate is definitely doing their work, and it's amazing to me listening to bits and pieces of it because I was working earlier today. But listening to bits and pieces, it's amazing, and I'm gratified. What a great memory that Director Comey has. But also, I think the senators, I listened a little bit what Senator Reid had to say, and they're doing their due diligence. It's tough to believe that this is actually going on. But it's interesting to see what the findings will be.
When as a legislator, I mean, you're not in Congress, but the bodies are similar, obviously, federal and state. If we had this kind of thing going on, whether stuff you're working on that we'll talk about here in the next segment would actually be easy to do. It's very distracting. I mean, yes. Obviously, and some of it's going to impact what you're worried about, some of the federal Affordable Care Act revisit type of stuff, which has got everybody's, you know what, in a bundle. It's just a very distracting thing. Legislation is hardly something that you can produce.
I think everything in Washington has been quite distracting since the president took the oath of office. It's a different time.
Yes, diplomatically said by a veteran elected official. Then again, if we ever had the legitimate 38 Studios investigation that we should have had, maybe we would have confused the General Assembly as well. That's my thought.
Well, that's there was something discovered just recently.
Yes. Interesting that the Senate President says, "Hey, there's a box. Now let's step forward this and this." Do you support the legislation that says open everything up?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
At the same time, even get opening everything up, we still need an independent counsel or some independent somebody or other to cull it, analyze it, summarize it, finish it for this public, which is damaged by it. Don't you agree?
I think it will go on and on and on until that does happen, even though I think everyone has been forthcoming at this point in time. I think it will continue on into history. You know, it will be part of history of Rhode Island, and I think there'll be more, you know, let's see what's in the box.
Can you imagine that you're saying that? Let's see what's in the box. All right, listen, let's see what's in the legislation. Why don't we have a full conversation on that when we come back? Stay with us.
And now they say, oh, no, it's still in there, but the insurance company can charge you whatever they want. You have cancer? Oh, that'll be $100,000 a year for your policy.
All right, it's just some of the tumult and anxiety that comes along with the American Health Care Act proposal passed by the House, which of course is designed to replace and repeal the Affordable Care Act, which if we had never called it Obamacare, probably would have sat there without so much angst. You agree with that, by the way?
You might be right.
Yeah, I mean, it's become a very personal political thing. Anyway, states are planning all sorts of cleanup to what the federal new direction might be, and this particular bill that you're talking about does that. Talk to me about this gender discrimination thing you're worried about.
Well, the Senate has passed this bill. This will be the third year. And basically it stops any type of gender discrimination against women in the healthcare insurance market. This year I feel it's particularly important because what has happened in Washington with Congress passing changes, repeal, what have you, to the ACA. The ACA presently, for small group employers, there isn't any gender discrimination. That's not. But for large group employers, it's still, they can still discriminate. But with the ACA,
well, they would not suggest that they're discriminating. They would suggest,
but they can,
that they are. Say that again?
They can. I mean, as far as health insurance premiums.
Understood. But they wouldn't use the word discriminate.
No, they would not. I'm sure they would not.
That's my point. They would set, you know, gender ratings and and premium costs associated with risk. That is what they talk about. And women have more programmatical issues.
Well,
right?
Well, you know, when you look at the long range.
I'm not advocating. I'm just
no, I know you're not.
Argument.
But in committee, we've heard pros and cons for years. But the main thing is women do have babies, but we want women to be healthy. They're born a woman. They're born with the ability to have children, which is a wonderful thing. And if they want to take care of themselves and stay healthy, we should encourage that. Women work they're in the workplace, they're in the military, they fly jets, they do just about anything that men do. So to me, they should be treated equally in the healthcare insurance market. And when you look at the long term...
I think 10 out of 10 people, if you ask them on the street, would agree with it.
Right.
But
it's amazing to me how many
or
states...
9 out of 10 at least.
Well, maybe 9 out of 10. But there's some people, if they sell insurance, they probably would disagree. But when you look at long range, people living longer, men are living longer, and men have a tendency to have more heart disease. A lot of them smoke, not so much cigarettes anymore, but cigars and all those kind of things. So that adds to some health issues later on. So when women are younger, childbearing age, well, they probably will use more medical coverage. But later on down the line, women are usually the ones that are very healthy, taking care of husbands or companions who, gentlemen
That's
who
an
are not
interesting
that.
argument to make. I mean, the stuff at end-of-life stuff for men is not necessarily as risk programmatically analyzed by the insurance industry, whereas pregnancy and some of the reproductive issues and those kind of things for women probably is. But I would think that 9 out of 10 people would say, yeah, it's just not fair. You want to put a stopgap to it here in Rhode Island. It's another one of a series of things that states and state legislatures are trying to do to kind of plug holes that they perceive will happen if we get a new health care bill.
Absolutely.
Exactly what is this going to demand?
Well, the way the bill is written, it would cover all employers, small groups and large employers across the board. Any health insurance, they wouldn't be able to have gender rating in any insurance. As I said before, with the ACA in place, small businesses, small employers, they're already covered as far as gender rating.
Have you done any analysis as to whether this will cause companies to pull out of the marketplace?
Well, we do hear that. The analysis has been done. It doesn't really show any proof of that because we've had the ACA. There's other reasons why some health insurance companies have pulled out of some states, but not necessarily because of that issue. When I look at and see how many states, 14 states have taken steps to ban or limit gender rating in the individual market. 17 states have laws banning or limiting gender rating for group health plans. And 9 states now require all insurers on the individual market to cover maternity care. So other states are definitely moving forward even before the ACA went into effect.
All right, so there's a whole bunch of freak show thing going on here when it comes to what's happening in Washington via the states. I don't know if you ever thought on just the overall cost. I mean, the target for Medicaid, I think, is the biggest worry here in the state. I mean, I'm sure you're on all issues health care. I mean, the health exchange, for the most part, whether you believe with the philosophy or not, has worked pretty efficiently.
It's worked very efficiently.
After it had a little bit of a stutter step, but it's done pretty well. But most of it's Medicaid-based.
It is.
And we could be looking at a few $100 million worth of priority spending that the state legislatures are going to have to take a look at, or ours specifically. What do you think?
Well, you're absolutely right, because we have elderly population is the highest elderly population, I believe, per capita in the country, and we do have great medical care.
Disabled, low income, that's where Medicaid is primarily.
And
right,
nursing homes, nursing home patients and so forth. And even though we've taken steps, those that don't need to be in a nursing home, we want them to have stay in their homes. That still costs money. Those still are Medicaid recipients. So yeah, we're talking about a big chunk of change.
Who knows, though, if we'll actually see a revision to the ACA?
Maybe not.
I mean, you know what? Right now, things are at slow-mo in Washington, but this is part of the prep. So it's passed the Senate. You want the House to pass it. You want people to tell their reps to do so.
Yes.
All right, when we come back, some farm business. Stay with us. All righty, so we have a petition signed by some local farmers under the context of Save Rhode Island Agriculture. And this is your district, all them farms down there in South County, right? You've got Block Island too, right?
I do.
Do you live on Block Island?
No, I live in South Kingstown.
How often do you get over there?
It depends how much they want me there. If there's a lot of issues and with the wind farm and the new Block Island utility legislation, I've been pretty busy.
So you enjoy the Block Island Ferry often?
Yes, and also New England Airlines.
Gotcha. You fly over there?
Yes.
What is it, 10 minutes?
Yeah, but it takes longer to drive from my home to Westerly Airport than it does to take the flight to Block Island.
No kidding.
But
amazing. So tell me what this controversy is all about.
Well, I was contacted by a farmer actually over in Little Compton. His name is Tyler Young, Young Family Farm. He's a potato grower. I think one of the largest potato growers in Rhode Island now. And he contacted me in kind of a panic over these new regulations that are proposed. You can see the size of the book here. And the reason that they're concerned about it, farmers including myself, we use good agricultural practices. That's a program that has been administered by Division of Agriculture and URI for years as far as sanitation in the fields and cleanliness and packaging and all those kind of things. And a lot of those things are in here, but this is enhanced. And it's enhanced to the point where it would be a duplicate of record keeping for farmers.
If an animal walks through a field or defecates on the land, farmers must document the instance and keep a record of the area for up to 2 years to ensure there's no contamination. They just can't pooper scooper and that's it.
Oh, I mean, and you know, are we going to be out in the field watching 24/7 if a deer runs through there, or if rabbits, or how about if a bird flies overhead? You know, we always wash produce, and when we sell it at the farmers markets, we always advise people, wash your produce before you eat it.
Right.
But the fact of trying to keep records of animals, wildlife, when DEM and federal officials can't even control wildlife, I think it's putting a lot of pressure on
And if someone's got the average
agriculture.
everyday cold and they come to pick fruit or vegetables, they got to send them home?
Have to send them home, and it has to be documented by the farm, the age of the individual, the time it happened. If you have, say for instance, you have a busload of school kids coming out to pick strawberries or pick apples, and there's 3 or 4 kids that have the sniffles, you got to keep track of that. You got to keep those records for 2 years. Now, I know that probably doesn't sound like much, but a farmer has a lot to do anyway, and the profit margin is not like corporate America. But it's concerning to me that if the enforcement arm for FDA is Department of Health, great people, but they're not farmers. If they are the enforcement arm and they come down on a farm and say, I heard that there was a busload of kids here and they had the sniffles and I want to see your records, and if the farmer doesn't have the records, then they could be fined. And the fines, they're not, the problem with this...
Fine, but the produce isn't, I'm just concerned about if there's really a mechanism to protect the consumer from getting a cold from a tomato, I guess it's probably impractical. Finding the farmer for something that in the end can't really be resolved.
You can't control it.
What do you do?
You can't control it.
I have 30 seconds. Tell me what the answer is here.
Okay, the answer is we've been meeting with our federal delegation. The Environment and Agriculture Committee sent letters to the President, Secretary of Agriculture, Congressional Delegation, the new Secretary of FDA, asking for repeal of the law, and if not, repeal of regulations. And we've met with our federal delegation, and so far, one portion of this has been pushed back, the water testing. So I encourage my farmers to keep at it.
And bring them up here. We'll hear the stories.
Yes, they'd love to come up and talk
Senator,
with you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Final word when we come back. Tomorrow night's program, a concept, Play for Peace. It's got a little basketball involved with it, which always catches my eye. So stay tuned for that tomorrow night. In the meantime, we'll see you on the radio on the Friday broadcast. I'm sure there'll be a lot of Comey talk still. Good night.